and Fenwick tried to make sense of our beautiful and broken world, and I hope this makes sense. So here we go. The fog this morning looked like this, and I found myself thinking about how is it that we find our way in the fog of the world in which we are experiencing. I mean, COVID-19 is one thing. What's happened in the last couple of weeks, as Eleni mentioned, quite another. Some of it needs fixing. Some of it needs healing. Some of it probably needs both. So it seems like there's lots of talk about light and dark, dark and light, and probably there needs to be more talk about something besides light and dark. And that's probably my message today, that it's not one or the other. It's probably somewhere in between. Another way of saying it is, it's not either or, it's probably both and. But we do have to take sides. If we don't take sides, we're cowards. And if we don't take sides, we're not Fenwick. We have to take sides on some things. There are some of them there. We need to stand up for human dignity and equal rights, freedom and justice. And as our speakers have said this week, we need to seek for peace and love. So when the sun rises, whose side will you be on? Right? Whose side will you be on when the sun rises? And that's what the sunrise looked like here at Fenwick this morning. Black lives, all lives. Police, protesters, left, right. I don't know. Are these even the right questions? You may ask, as well you should, you deserve to know, whose side is Fenwick on? I was talking to somebody the other day and I said, well, Fenwick, we have kids of color and we have kids of cops. Like, we're all in this thing together. This is part of life. This is part of our reality. In our community, we have to acknowledge we have students and adults who have suffered from discrimination and injustice, from prejudice and racism and isms of all kinds. And you know what, myself included, we also have students and adults who have caused suffering. Many levels, I suppose, we all have. So we're still, though, one school, one community, one Fenwick. We might get our news from different places. We might define our views in different ways, but we're one family. So we stand together. This is where Fenwick stands. This is right where Fenwick stands. None of this is tolerable. None of this is acceptable. None of this has any place in our school. None of it. And I wanted to emphasize through the fog something very clearly. There can be no hate speech. That's the bare minimum. There can be no hate. That's what this is all about. As the fog lifts, right, we have to affirm and commit ourselves to no hate speech, no hate. So we stand together with our brothers and sisters who have suffered and who still suffer. That's how we're going to go through this. And when we all come back in the fall, this dialogue will continue. And I hope and pray that it continues right from today. So email me or text me or drop me a note if you have an insight or a comment or a reflection or something that can help move our community forward, because we need all of us. So let us be the sun to burn off the fog. So I'm going to share with you before we leave 3 slides. The second one is kind of quiet. The first one is this. Today is the anniversary of the clearing of Tiananmen Square in 1989. Yesterday, the government and the protesters, most of those protesters, by the way, were students. They were at a critical point. They were at a point of no return. And neither was backing down. And the students this morning stayed on the front lines, and the aggression came. History records at 4 a.m., the lights on the square suddenly turned off, and the government's loudspeaker announced, "Clearance of the square begins now." The students sang the Internationale, a song that was part of their protests in favor of democracy, and braced for the last stand. No one really knows how many people were killed that day. It's still a very secret part of history in China. Hundreds for sure, some say thousands. And the next day, when all was said and done, there was this photo. All we know of that young man is that he's been known now as Tank Man. We don't know what happened to him, although we know that he was named by Time magazine as one of the most 100 influential people in the 20th century. The next picture is what most of you saw when you looked at your phones on Tuesday. Blackout. Silence. And maybe a voice in that silence. Protest. Solidarity. Pretty powerful. So I'm going to leave you with a little more hopeful sign, a sign that's really much closer to home than any of us might have imagined. A really hopeful sign. So when you look at that photo, pretty stunning really, and its power and beauty, you should know this. The person on the left of that photo, the white person, if you want to call him that, who has his arm around the black person, if we need to continue making those distinctions. His name is Charlie St. Pierre. He's a graduate of Bishop Fenwick, class of 2013. He was a football captain of the state championship team that year. He's the nephew of our own Mrs. Hart. He went on to the University of West Virginia, and he was volunteering with the Peace Corps in Albania before COVID-19 hit. Look at that picture. There are lots of words we can share about what is happening in our world and how we might respond to it. I don't think they matter near as much as this photo. So lift the fog. Be the change. Be the change. Because we are, after all, one family, one Fenwick.